I really do. As someone who's involved as a marketing and branding show, it always sends a very positive message to say, we seriously mean business. We want to literally walk the streets of the city or the province for you, the citizens of the community. So perhaps more walking of the streets will happen today as you present in this case, the Gauteng Midterm Review. Premier Makhura, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashraf, the director of the program this morning. I would like to first acknowledge all the MECs who are here with us this morning, the DG of our province, and the heads of departments who have joined us, the executive mayors from the different municipalities, the chairpersons of portfolio committees in our legislature, the representatives of various organizations of civil society. I've seen a lot of them here, organizations representing business, faith-based community, organized labor, sports, and the institutions of learning, as well as the youth and women's organizations. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago, exactly on the 21st of May in 2014, I took the oath of office as the 6th Premier of Gauteng Province. Today, it is with an abiding fidelity and a profound sense of duty to the citizens of our province that we gather here to unveil the midterm report to the people of our province. And this is a report that tells the story of what has been the work we have done since the 21st of May 2014. We are here to table this report partly to elicit feedback, which we will get today immediately, but we expect more feedback from across the different sectors of the population in our province. We are keeping to our long-standing and unflinching commitment to the values of openness, accountability, and responsiveness, the values that continue to define the administration I have the honor to lead. Ours is also a government whose policies, actions, and decisions are premised on evidence and facts, nothing more, nothing less. Ladies and gentlemen, the Gauteng Provincial Government Midterm Report reflects in great detail and provides evidence of the progress we have made in the first 2.5 years of our term of office, as well as the challenges we are facing in the course of pursuing our program of transformation, modernization, and re-industrialisation, which is our own provincial plan to implement our country's national development plan. We are honest about what has been achieved, open about our challenges and shortcomings. We owe a lot of what progress we have made to our partnership with various sectors of society, which includes business, communities of faith, and other organized groups in our province. This report has received critical reviews already by academics and policy experts, and some of that you will hear later when the panel discusses. But we have certainly already received critical reviews to point to what we may be missing, because it's important for us to understand this feedback. So I would like to urge you, the report is very long. I would like to urge you to take time, even after today, to go through this report to see if there's a basis and what this basis is of the issues that we are pointing out. So, as public representatives in our province, we will continue, even as we present this report and as we serve our people in the remaining 2 years of our term of office, we'll continue to do so with humility, with distinct honesty and diligence, which has become the hallmark of the fifth administration in our province. Overall, the report tells a story that despite the many challenges we are facing, we are making substantial progress, and in particular, over the past 2.5 years, there are areas of very, very distinct progress that we will share with you. It is important, ladies and gentlemen, to say that despite sluggish growth and tough economic conditions globally and domestically, our province has remained resilient in economic terms. It continues to grow as the economic engine of our country and the industrial hub of the SADC region. We are also encouraged by the advances we are making in different areas of social transformation, which relate to both education, healthcare, and fighting poverty. Mr. Program Director, notwithstanding the progress we are making, we are admitting in this report, as we have always done through various state of the province addresses we give annually, that there are areas of weakness and there are emerging challenges as we tackle our tasks of transforming, modernizing, and re-industrializing Gauteng. One central challenge remains that far too many of our people are unemployed, and especially young people, 2.7 million of which are out of school and out of work. The level of inequality remains very high, with a Gini coefficient of 0.7, and poverty has become very acute, leaving more than 16% of the population of our province without the certainty of income, and many of whom go to bed hungry, not just once a week, but almost every day. So we are deeply concerned that as a relatively wealthy province, there are still too many of our people left out of the mainstream of our economy, and many are barely surviving. This includes the fact that the cost of living is very high in a province like ours, therefore having a direct bearing on the survival of many who have great difficulty in keeping up and coping with the economic situation. It's also important to point to the challenge of crime in our province that has become the #1 challenge and the #1 concern facing many across the communities, regardless of class, gender, and race, but the increasing number also of gender-based violence, incidents of gender-based violence, including the murder of women and children, is a matter of great concern. So, ladies and gentlemen, all these issues are reflected in the report. And I want to take an opportunity to give you a little bit more detail on the key areas where we have made progress and where we have challenges. Firstly, with regard to the economy, our province remains the leading destination for foreign direct investment in Africa and a leading exporter of manufactured goods and services. Between 2014 and 2016, 66 billion rands worth of FDI flows moved into our province. Exports have grown as a percentage of GDP from 44% to 53%. Our province has recorded the largest net gain in new jobs created since the 2008 global financial crisis. Between 2010 and 2016, our economy created more than 700,000 new jobs. Our direct engagement with business leaders in key sectors has opened useful avenues for dialogue and partnership between business and provincial government in growing our economy in an inclusive manner. The provincial government has increased its spend on the township economy from 600 million in 2014 to 6 billion in 2016 as part of tackling inclusive growth, so that the township businesses are not left behind, so that empowerment is not only about looking for those who are brought in big corporations one by one. We must bring a critical mass of entrepreneurs who are in the townships who for a while had been forgotten. The number of township enterprises that are empowered through public procurement has increased from 800 in 2015 to 2,800 in 2016. 91% of our public procurement budget is spent empowering the historically disadvantaged individuals. Out of 12,000 enterprises that do business with government, 10,000 of them are businesses owned by blacks, women, youth, and people with disability. Gauteng also has 53 black industrialists who have emerged over the last 2.5 years, who are funded by the IDC, who are involved in the real business of manufacturing goods, many of which will be for export. A total of 453 smallholder farmers across our province are being supported with infrastructure, production inputs, and extension services through our farmer support and development program. So these are the areas we have done pretty well in the midterm, just over the past 2.5 years. But, and I want to put a big but with regard to the economy, the number of jobs being created by our economy don't match the critical number of people who are economically active, partly arising from in-migration. The second key problem is that the structure of our economy remains problematic, as we spelled out in the State of the Province address in 2015. And parts of that is the economy still principally excludes a large number of black people, women, and young people. And the economy significantly is reducing its manufacturing base, which is a matter of great concern. Our economy is still also dominated by large monopolies, few in each sector, 3 to 4 companies in each sector that throttle particularly SMMEs, creating great difficulty with competitiveness, particularly on matters of pricing. As we always say, monopolies are no good for an economy. And lastly, we are entering a new period of sluggish growth, and the downgrade we have experienced doesn't augur well for the momentum we have been building over the past 2.5 years. If we are to create more jobs, to which I will return later, if we are to do major restructuring of our economy to ensure that it responds to the imperatives of an inclusive growth and address other important aspects facing our economy. The period we are in of a downgrade doesn't augur well for tackling these challenges, and the momentum may slow down. With regard to infrastructure investment, the provincial government has invested 30 billion rands between 2013 and 2016 in infrastructure. The infrastructure investment has impacted positively on our economy and on households. Firstly, creating jobs, particularly 92,000 jobs created out of our infrastructure investment, contributing to household income, generating additional economic activity and government revenue, as well as empowering the previously disadvantaged. The rollout of more than 1,500 kilometers of fiber network throughout our province as part of the Gauteng Broadband Network project has been a major boost to our economy, with over 800 access sites having been added to the network across our province. Household internet connectivity has increased from 59% in 2014 to 65% in 2015. But we've got a big problem with our broadband connectivity. It is too slow. Speed is an important question of competitiveness. And that's a matter, MEC Chris, we must attend to. 12 major roads have been rehabilitated, linking key economic nodes across our province, and 9 additional ones upgraded, offering more alternatives to the existing roads that are tolled. Progress has been made with the rollout of the bus rapid transit systems in the 3 metros, and the focus is now on integrating the BRTs in the different parts of our province, together with the Gautrain, Metro Rail, and the taxi industry into a single transport authority that will move people seamlessly across the different parts of Gauteng. In the last Gauteng City Region Observatory survey published in July 2016, infrastructure obtained the highest rating by Gauteng residents with regard to satisfaction level. So when people were asked in rating all areas of government service delivery, I think it was 82% of the people of our province said the one thing they are very satisfied with is the quality of infrastructure in Gauteng. So it's the #1 issue rated very well across the province by the residents of Gauteng. That's infrastructure. But, so even with infrastructure, we should say but. Infrastructure requirements of our province are huge, far exceeding current budgets. Firstly, infrastructure backlogs, but our infrastructure needs for the coming 15 years are huge, amounting to almost 2 trillion rands. So we don't have enough money as government to meet our infrastructure requirements. And therefore, we have turned to the mobilization of private sector funding for infrastructure investments in different areas, from public transport to mega human settlements, to energy, ICT, as well as other areas of infrastructure, particularly the roads across the province. So going forward, we have to work with business, especially in the light of the downgrade. We have to go to business, South African business, and we recently had a very good funding summit on mega human settlements with business people who are showing appetite for mobilizing capital, existing capital, to put that into our infrastructure projects. With regard to housing delivery and new mega human settlements and post-apartheid cities, an issue that in 2014 we made a commitment to. between 2001 and 2016, formal dwellings increased from 74% to 81% in Gauteng, whilst informal dwellings decreased from 23 to 17%. Formal structures have increased, and the number of informal structures have particularly decreased. And this is a result of a very robust housing delivery program which saw 1.2 million RDP houses delivered in our province, and this is 31% of the national housing stock delivered by government between 1994 and 2016. Provincial government has undertaken to develop 31 mega human settlements in partnership with the private sector. And this is a very important development that will help change the spatial landscape of our province. And the reason we resorting to mega human settlements is that the housing backlog, despite this record of 1.2 million houses, the housing backlog still stands at 600,000 across the province. And MEC Mashatile, it is not a surprise that people are protesting in different areas of the province, because housing is amongst the top issues that for a long while have persisted. Even as we deliver, the number of people who need housing remains huge. So we can't tackle this backlog by delivering small numbers of housing. That's why we talk of mega human settlements. Access to basic services such as water, sanitation, electricity, and refuse removal in our province is relatively high. Water at 97%, sanitation 91%, refuse removal 91%, and electricity at 4%. It's very important to understand the impact of the informal structures on access to electricity. There's been decrease in access to electricity as the different parts of the province informalizes. So informal settlements have a huge impact on things like access to electricity. So in that regard, in some areas, we are moving in reverse. I would also like to, before I bring you to the but, yes, no, I'm going to the but. So increases in formalization, formal dwellings, decreases in informal dwellings, but the number of backyards in the old townships has increased quite dramatically. And that's one thing that needs to be understood. The old townships, the older townships are left behind because government is building largely accommodating people in the informal settlements. So that's one of the narratives you should understand. The protests that you see, particularly in areas that are more formal, older townships, is a story that cuts across the older townships everywhere. The number of backyards in the townships has increased quite dramatically. As our housing delivery is responding largely to people locating informally all over the province. And that's why we have to insist on an approach to housing delivery that is organized, not driven by illegal occupation of land. And then people start calling for delivery of houses once they've occupied land illegally, because government then rushes to them and leaves those who have been waiting on the lists in the older townships, and that will breed lots of tension amongst our people. And that's why we must also follow the list, the properly verified list of beneficiaries that has been confirmed. And lastly, on housing, one of the messages we want to convey to the people of our province is that the new mega human settlements are built integrated with economic and public transport networks. And some of our people still feel that if my parents are in Jabulani, and then there's a housing opportunity elsewhere outside Jabulani, I will not take that opportunity because, our ancestors are lying here. I will not follow a housing opportunity closer to an economic opportunity. I want to be housed closer to my ancestors. The message we have been sending across through Ntirisano is that our people have to get accustomed to following opportunities rather than waiting where they are and saying they need houses, even in places where there's no economic opportunity, that we're building where there are no economic opportunities. So the approach of mega human settlements is to locate people where they are closer to economic opportunities. And those who are on the housing list who qualify must be willing to move to any part of the province and leave the sentiment behind. Ukuthi mina ngibuya e-Orlando yabo. Ngifuna indlu yami e-Orlando. Angiyilutho mina. So we can't build anymore. In many of these townships, we can't build anymore. There's no land, so even if they march every day to us, in many of these areas, it is impossible to build. But we also want to deliberately integrate our people across the different circumstances they found themselves. So if there's a housing opportunity for people in Lenasia or in Eldos, that housing opportunity is somewhere outside there where there's closer to economic opportunity. We would like our people to understand, follow the opportunity, rather than waiting for a house where you are. With regard to investing in the youth, in 2014 we launched a program that we called TEPO 500,000, which was about opening opportunities for our youth in the area of skills development, entrepreneurship development, as well as placement of young people who often are called to show experience when they would have no experience. So we have been successful in getting 350,000 young people trained, and many of those, we have different numbers, 9,500 of them have now established their own enterprises which are getting support across the province, particularly from government. And many young people have been equipped with the skills that are now helping them to have access to employment. 91,000 of them are employed. These are young people who in May 2014 were unemployed. The number is quite significant, but 2.7 million young people are hanging out there in our province, waking up in the townships, many of them open and vulnerable to be lost to drugs and crime. So 500,000, which is the target we set for ourselves at the beginning of the term, is not good enough. So that's why we have taken a decision mid-term, halfway through our term, to up the number from 500,000, double it to 1 million. So we now talk of TEPO 1 million. This is a very, very difficult task. As I said when we were launching this program, this is very risky politically. When you are about to meet your target of 500,000, you are at 350 halfway through your term. In government, people can tend to say, we are doing so well, let's pat ourselves on the back, we will reach the 500,000. So that's fine, Premier. We will say we have reached the target. But what does 500,000 mean when there are 2.7 million young people who are out there? So that's why we have decided that it's the risk worth taking to double that number, to work with business to try and reach 1 million young people by the end of our term, which is just 2 years away. And I can assure you that The work we are doing with the private sector has generated lots of passion amongst different private sector companies. And I must thank those who joined us, who we will be signing some agreements with, partnership agreements with. This includes the media. This story I must tell. The media is often seen as people who must just write the stories. But we, on the youth program, TEPO 1 Million, we have a partnership with the media as well. As citizens who are equally touched by the need to impact on the lives of 2.7 million young people, not just by writing stories. So there are media houses that have made a commitment, which we will also, in June, we are going to unveil which are those, and other private sector players who have made a commitment about what they are going to do. So I want truly from the bottom of my heart to thank all our partners who are working with us to touch the lives of at least 1 million young people, to give them hope and get them away from the potential wasteland where their lives may be wasted by crime and drugs. With regard to public education, access to early childhood development in Gauteng is now at 95%. Fast approaching universal access of 100%. Primary school attendance rate is at 95% as well. And secondary school attendance rate is at 92%. Literacy rate is at 96%. And the number of those who are over 20 without education has been reduced by half, from 4.5% to 2.3%. The number of learners in public education has almost doubled from 1.3 million in 1994 to 2.3 million in 2016. Pro-poor policies have made it possible for 1.4 million of these learners in our system from poor families to have access to a meal every day through school nutrition program. And 1.2 million of them have access to education through no-fee school policy. And another 100,000 learners are receiving scholar transport. Gauteng continues to be amongst the top 3 best performing provinces with regard to the National Senior Certificate examinations. And we contribute 23% of all bachelor passes and 22% to distinctions in the country. Our province performed better than all provinces in the 2016 report on trends in international mathematics and science benchmarking study. As part of modernizing public education, we have been rolling out e-learning across the province. 1,861 grade 12 classrooms have been converted to smart classrooms. The performance of township schools has improved quite dramatically over this midterm period. Our provincial government has invested more than 800 million rand in bursaries, learnerships, and internships in order to equip our youth with the necessary skills and work experience. 17 new public ordinary schools have been completed over this midterm period. 11 special schools for learners who have physical disabilities, who are deaf and blind, have also been established, particularly in the townships where these special schools never existed before. But, and this is a big but, there's a continuing mismatch between our education system and the skills that are produced and those required by key sectors of industry, as we have come to acknowledge when we interact with business across the province. And hence we have launched what's called the schools of specialization. But the basis of that is because of acknowledging the gap that exists in our current system of education. And this is a matter we are tackling as well, together with various sectors of industry in different ways. With regard to public health, life expectancy has increased by an average of 6 years from 50 57.7 years in between the 2001 and 2006 period to 63.6 years in the period between 2011 and 2016. Now, what is the story here? Every one of you sitting here have at least 5 more years added to your lives. That's the direct citizen interpretation. Every one of you, men and women sitting here, we went through a period in our country where years were being subtracted. Life expectancy was reaching a dangerously low level in the period referred to here, the period 2001 and 2006. There's a significant turnaround in that regard. Significant progress has been made to reduce the rate of mother-to-child transmission, and this is from 8% in 2011 to less than 2% just in 2016. TB screening has been strengthened to reach just under 5 million people, resulting in improved TB outcomes. Particularly, the cure rate has improved from 79% in 2009 to 87% in 2015. One of the important things you need to know is that TB is the #1 killer in South Africa. It's not HIV and AIDS. TB is the #1 killer. And making improvements in the TB cure rate is one of the significant measures of the health of our public health system. Something that's very, very important. Efforts to improve the quality of primary health care have seen government enrolling 165 clinics as part of the National Ideal Clinic Program, which is basically a program to ensure that all clinics and community health centers adhere to national standards about the quality of care and infrastructure-related issues and so forth and so forth. Gauteng has obtained the highest average score on ideal clinics by the end of 2016 at 78% against the national average of 69.2%. An ideal clinic must be open on time, it must be clean, it must be staffed by health professionals that practice the values of Batupili and not close until all the last patient has come in. Government has also increased the ward-based primary health care teams, and we hope by 2019 we will have 400 ward-based primary health care teams. And this may sound very much like government talk. Ward-based teams are the teams that visit house by house to check and to build a profile of every household, to check in this household who is not well, what medication do they take, what support do they need. They don't have to be walking all the time to the nearest health facility. The ward-based teams do door-to-door work. They are servicing households, including understanding the profile of that household. Was the most common disease, including lifestyle issues and nutrition. What do people eat in this family, which contribute to ill health? So this ward-based health teams are very, very important pillar of our primary healthcare system. The digitization of patient files is currently underway. And again, here the idea is not just preoccupation with technology, is that it must reduce the burden on patients and families to go and wait for 5 hours at a hospital because they've lost your files. So digitization of patient files and the electronic health system, very, very important. Technology is very important to impact on the quality of care and how much patients and families take when they visit our facilities is something that we must worry about, and we want to cut the time all the time so they can be seen. Patients can be seen very quickly when they visit health facilities, and many of them take time off from work so they can return to work. So this is a citizen and patient focus measure. 3 hospitals are currently under construction, and additional 5 hospitals are undergoing revitalization. But what is the big issue? Despite all this, the big issue with our healthcare system is that it is not so healthy itself. And this story is told principally by the life Esidimeni tragedy, the most vulnerable, who needed state support and care most, perished. There are major institutional challenges across the system. There are serious infrastructure problems, including what in the Gauteng City region Quality of Life survey released last year in July. One of the biggest complaints from citizens is how they are treated in our health facilities. Despite the ideal clinic model, more than 80% of Gauteng citizens complain about the treatment they are receiving from health workers. So there's a lack of patient focus. There are major funding problems, not just with healthcare in Gauteng, but our health services, public health services across the country. So there are institutional issues, there are funding issues, there are infrastructure issues, there are people issues. And this necessitates a major overhaul of our healthcare system. And this story is illustrated again by the life Esidimeni tragedy. And that's something that over the next 2 years will be the major focus of our provincial government in turning around the healthcare system. With regard to reducing inequality and eradicating poverty and hunger, the poverty rate count has reduced from 10.5% in 2001 to 4.6% in 2016. It has been halved, basically. Gauteng has the highest Human Development Index of 0.71. I need to mention this, together with the Western Cape. Our province has the highest Human Development Index. Investment in people, we're doing pretty well there. Inequality declined from 0.75 in 2013 to 0.70 in 2015. It's slight decline, but it's still significant. Inequality is still very high. 0.70 is still extremely high. We are an extremely unequal province. And when we deal later with social cohesion, the implications are so clear what this inequality is bearing is on people's attitudes. Our intervention program called Welfare to Work has been able to help young people who were 10,500 young mothers who were on the social grant, state social grant system, have been trained, retrained, and are now working. They've been equipped with the necessary skills to find employment, and they can work for themselves and earn an income to help their children without depending on the state. You know what this program demonstrates? It shows that, especially with young people, need to be equipped with the skills. They don't need RDP houses. Young people don't need to be put on grants. They need to be given an opportunity, equipped with the skills and given an opportunity to work for themselves, because that way they earn their own dignity. And that's why our education system's focus is to equip young people and give them the skills they need to focus on helping themselves and contributing to society instead of they being on the grant system. Our Banapili program has overseen the distribution of close to 600,000 dignity packs over the midterm, and this includes particularly girls of school-going age. Of course, there are boys also in the townships who, without these dignity packs, would be struggling. There's the dignity packs that have to do with sanitary pads, but in the packs, there's also issues like the toothbrush, Vaseline, basic things we can often take for granted, those of us who come from from families where those are the things we can't worry about. But many of us grew up going to school, walking barefoot, knowing that just to get lotion to put on your skin is something you have to battle for. So both the boys and girls, the dignity packs are giving them indeed a lot of dignity in this regard as part of our intervention. So even with this intervention, we have a but here. Poverty has become more acute and more intense in Gauteng. 16.5% of households have no income at all, and hunger is now more prevalent amongst at least 16.3% of households, as I said, who go to bed hungry. In a province that's relatively well off, the economic engine of South Africa, which also attracts a lot of people because it is still a place of hope, where many who escape poverty across the country come here looking for opportunities, enormous opportunities. So the consequence of this is that we must have a more targeted approach to dealing with poverty, particularly in regions and districts such as the West Rand Mayor. The West Rand and Sedibeng are what we call the red districts, the most acute regions where the burden of poverty, disease, unemployment, the triple burden of that impacts more severely on the West Rand and in Sedibeng. And these are regions and district municipalities, unlike the metros, who have a very low revenue base, including direct grants from national government, are largely concentrated in the metros for public transport and many other infrastructure projects. And as a consequence of this, working with MEC Mashatile, we have gotten national agreement now from the Minister of Human Settlements that the district municipalities will also get direct grants for infrastructure, especially the human settlement grants. Because in the past, right up to now, they were not getting that type of support. And yet, they are the poorest part of our province, and we will say the same across the country. The districts, because the metros are much fewer, they have high concentration of acute poverty. So these interventions will be very important. With regard to crime, I am very disturbed to really report that crime has become the #1 issue for residents in Gauteng. So over the last few days and few months, many of us have been observing incidents, but crime has bypassed unemployment and housing. For many surveys conducted by the Gauteng City region, at least over the last 7 years, unemployment-related jobs, housing, at different points, they would be the #1 issues. And you understand why. Crime would be somewhere below housing and unemployment as an issue of great concern, together with corruption. But crime has now become the #1 issue affecting Gauteng residents. Followed by #2, drugs. Drugs have become also the biggest concern in the short periods. And these crimes committed, there's a link between particularly violent crimes and particularly gender-based violence and crimes perpetrated against children. There's a link between that and drugs. There's a direct relationship. And the #3 issue is now unemployment. So that's the point I'm making, that unemployment, which is the issue of jobs and human settlements, have fallen below, and that the top 2 issues of concern everywhere across geography, across race, across gender in Gauteng, across class, is The number one issue is crime, and the number two issue is drugs. You are not so secure even if you are in the suburbs, including MEC Lesufi. Even the schools in the suburbs are targeted for distribution of drugs through our children, regardless of class. So these two issues have become, not that the others are no longer, but they have become the most urgent and most pressing issues that citizens are feeling the heat about. Social cohesion and nation building, there are interventions we have been making. If you understand the structural problems of social pathologies, whether it's crime or drugs, or the issues of cost of living, the issues of social cohesion, we live in a province that's relatively well off, or the issues of the conditions under which people live have a direct bearing on the level of cohesion in a province like ours. So we have programs in largely sports and activities, but because at the core of these issues is the social conditions under which our people live, we're not making so progress even with our social cohesion and nation building programs, which means it is important that we tackle social cohesion and nation building by addressing marginalization and by ensuring that there is inclusion. So the programs of economic inclusion are that's the most direct way to deal with issues of social cohesion. When people live outside, they have no means of life, calling them to work together and so on means nothing. Especially when they still live in different communities and our housing delivery is not bringing them together. So I think that's the real emphasis on social cohesion, that we have to get to the core of the problem of addressing the conditions under which people live. In a province like ours, we need to record that there is palpable social tension all the time across different communities. When you see an explosion by a protest in one area, even where there's no protest, there's palpable social tension all the time. And this arises also from the conditions under which our people live. High rate, the cost of living, those who in the townships, you know, the cost of living, people complain there that electricity is too expensive. Food is too expensive. And side by side with these difficulties, you live in a province where others are seen to be making it. Those things contribute to permanent, palpable social tension. You can touch it. So when there's an explosion and people are protesting in one area, it's about housing. It's never about one issue alone. So MEC Mashatile goes to the south. When they talk about housing, they will also talk about we are unemployed as Sebens. There's conditions under which they live. We have problems. Electricity is too expensive. Food prices. The full impact, they may protest or use one issue. But if you get behind that, there's a story behind that. Our people, in many instances, as the economy goes through difficulty, not creating enough jobs, our people are finding difficulty to cope. And this brings me to the last but one issue about how we are doing with regard to building a culture of responsive, clean, and accountable governance. If you take all the other set of social and economic issues together, high rate of crime, drugs, and the fact that the cost of living is huge, and that many people are unemployed, and if a government does not run its affairs well, it adds up to that tension. If government officials are seen to be unaccountable, corrupt, a law unto themselves, not caring, arrogant, that adds to the social tension that you can touch with your own hands. At the slightest moment, you light the fuse. So we are a province, essentially, that has enormous opportunities, because that's why many people are here. attracts many numbers of people. Yes, enormous opportunities, but there is acute poverty, high rate of unemployment existing side by side with high inequality, and there's opulence. So those things lead to people thinking half the time they can take the law into their own hands. When something doesn't work, they take the law into their own hands. So how are we doing in this regard? We have introduced the open tender system that is now being implemented across all departments in our province to particularly make sure all procurement decisions are made transparently and openly. So an era where officials who sit in the procurement committees or bid committees and whatever name they are called, who make procurement decisions, an era where they can cut deals before the actual meeting. That era is fast coming. It's fast coming to an end. It's fast passing. And I think we have been acting in a way that ensures there's public scrutiny and transparency on all procurement decisions. This is not easy, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes we have to send back decisions if there is a problem with an open tender, and then along the lines there are problems, there are complaints. This process has to start again. It must be audited by independent auditors. Sometimes it delays decisions. But we want to make sure that at least the big tenders, about 50 million now, we will, across the province, the big ones, all of them are done through the open tender system. By the time the tender is awarded, we want to be sure that there's no shenanigans there. As part of promoting transparency and accountability, and we get rid of bribery in the system. Integrity management is something we are institutionalizing through an office in the Premier that's working with all departments to fight corruption and ensure swift action where there are officials who are found guilty of graft or gross financial misconduct. And one of the important things I would like to say, you will see it in the notes distributed for the media, is that we will be launching a civil society-driven initiative that will help us watch that no one in Gauteng is involved in corruption. I want to emphasize, not another government-driven initiative. We have too many corruption-fighting agencies. We now want a civil society team, which we will call the Premier's Anti-Corruption, the Premier's Anti-Corruption and Integrity Committee, which is a civil society. We will draw in all people in civil society who are interested in fighting corruption, or they are already fighting corruption, like Corruption Watch and others, to ensure that they watch over us as civil society and report every corrupt action. Because sometimes we say people must report to government, and people are reluctant to report to government. At least that committee will help us. That civil society committee will help us to deal with corruption across the province in this regard. We have also improved significantly in financial management. You now know that all our departments in the last financial year, 2015-16, got unqualified audits, and within that, 60% of them got clean audits. The journey towards the end of term is to get 100%. And that drive is moving very, very well. We are also pushing on the payment of service providers in time, and I think we are at a point where 93% of invoices are paid by 11 out of 14 departments. I must say that at the midterm, there were 11, but now there are 12. So at the point of the midterm, they were 11. So DID has also joined them. You know, infrastructure development has usually been a big culprit in payment of service providers on time. So as we speak, there are now 12. They can pay 93% of invoices within 30 days. And the one I like is the 79% of the invoices paid within 15 days. Because there's the national standard, which is 30 days. But we set ourselves a standard of 15 days. And it can be done. So 79% of invoices are already being paid within that period. We are helping health and education. And I spoke earlier on about financial challenges of health. And education also has a historical problem that we have been dealing with. It's not out of lack of wanting to do it, but they have improved a lot. I think education has improved a lot. MEC Ramokgopa, we still have to work together on health. So one big issue is that there is a big risk there in health. Where is the risk coming from on health? It's what medical legal. These people, the lawyers who are moving everywhere trying to ensure that government is sued on everything and everything. What is the big issue there of bad? Corruption remains a big issue in Gauteng. Even 82% of the people of Gauteng. So I said to you, it has fallen below crime and drugs and unemployment, but it is still a big issue of concern. 82% of the people of Gauteng. It used to be 89%. When we started our term, in 2014, it was at 89%. It has now gone down to 82%. It's still too many people. So the citizens are saying, yes, we are seeing what you are doing, but it's not enough. It's still a big issue of concern. They say it's a threat to democracy. So that's something that, so when we do all these things to tackle corruption, it's because the citizens of our province are concerned about it. And many of them get asked, have you paid a bribe? The survey also asked them, have you been asked for a bribe? Many of them encounter these things. And I don't know about you, especially with the authorities when you are driving along the road. So one of the things we really have to target is Metro Police across Gauteng and the police services across Gauteng. When we launched that campaign with civil society, areas of corruption, so public procurement, the licensing issues, huge corruption with the licensing authorities, and all these areas will be a key area of focus for us. So I want to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by just referring you to what we are going to be focusing at. In the next 2 years, so I was saying exactly 3 years ago, we started our term of office. So given all the bads and given all the emerging issues, as we pursue the transformation, modernization, and re-industrialization agenda, there are certain areas that we are going to prioritize. On the economy, I've already spoken to what the challenge is. And the work we are doing with industry, especially through industry visits, exciting things are there. We don't like setting a target that is a GDP target for growth. And I want to repeat this. GDP doesn't quite tell the full story of an economy. For me, the full story is how many jobs an economy is creating. So if you just set a 5% GDP growth rather than direct job numbers, you are just playing games with the population. So we are not interested in those games. The economy can grow at 10%, but if it's not creating jobs, and if it's not inclusive, if it's not helping to put bread on the table for many of these families who are living precarious lives, we are not interested in pursuing a percentage for its own sake. So that's those important issues of inclusion, of jobs, which includes an empowerment, but also sector-specific strategies and region-specific interventions, corridors, with the priority of the West Rand and Sidibeng, we're doing pretty well in those areas. Youth, I've already dealt with this issue on youth. Investing in infrastructure, the story explains itself, how much we're going to spend 42 billion in infrastructure investment. And we want, through just infrastructure investment, we want to generate 100,000 direct jobs through government infrastructure program. So we're not just sitting waiting for the private sector to create jobs. So we are putting money into the economy to generate the kind of activity that will lead to, of course, most of the jobs are going to come from the private sector, from the rest of the economy. Roads and transport, you will see what our key priorities are there in specific areas. And I also want to say, we have made a commitment that we are building new roads in Gauteng, but those roads will not be tolled. Yes, we have made that commitment. We are building new highways, they will not be tolled. Even as we engage with business on alternative funding by the private sector, how that will be paid for, we will not put the method of tolling. Because that's a challenge is that is direct additional taxation of people who are barely surviving. It's not only working people, the poor and the working class who are barely surviving. Even the middle strata, professionals, they are barely surviving. And I would say that I think those who have to travel long distances, who work in Tshwane, living here in Johannesburg, those who are middle strata but they live far from where they work, they are heavily taxed by the e-tolls. And we understand that resentment that is brewing there as well. We want to improve road maintenance. We also want to ensure that most of the Gauteng roads are resurfaced in the run-up to the end of our term and intervene and modernize our DLTCs. You don't have to go to a place called the licensing center to renew your license and come face to face with some corrupt official who want to extract money from you. You should be able to renew your license electronically. And then the matter is settled. Technology helps us to remove human contact in many areas where human contact just is toxic. It just creates problems into the system. I have already spoken about human settlements. The critical issue in human settlements is the 31 mega projects across the province. Again, on education, I think I have dealt with that. On healthcare, you will see that on healthcare, we put a lot of emphasis on dealing with the issues I was raising that have led us to a very, very unfortunate situation. Our intervention so far on life many recommendations of the health ombudsman, we have done a great deal of work there. I don't want to take you through that detail. The MEC has been doing updates. The minister and I will announce the mediator soon to deal with issues of compensation for families who are bereaved. And the rest of the health issues I've dealt with there. I just want to go to the end, just go to safety there. One of the things to deal with this issue, that crime is the number one issue. Tomorrow I'm meeting the police chiefs in the province. Right up to cluster level. And we are now setting targets for police. For every station, there are 40 high crime spots across Gauteng, 40 of them. Police stations that are crime hotspots, all manner of crimes. So we are setting a target about reducing the crime of rape by 50%. I met with the minister, the new Minister of Police, Minister Mbalula, myself, the MEC, had a meeting with him to put the story before him that crime is out of control in Gauteng. And we need national government support from the point of view of resources, police vehicles that are often trapped in the government garage forever, and the teams, crime-fighting teams, including specialized units. That's what we want to deal with the problem, including the problem of drugs across the safety of women, femicide, all murder and robbery, including business robbery. By the way, the township enterprises, many township enterprises say their number one problem is that since in the past 2.5 years, when they have been assisted through our strategy to come up, they get robbed almost every day. They experience crime more often now than they have ever had. Robbery from a spaza shop or a shop in the township. They would otherwise would be doing very, very well. So crime is going to be the critical issue that is elevated as we do the economy, as we deal with education, as we deal with human settlements. We are going to elevate the crime fighting to the right level. And we want citizens in our province to be all out to work with us and make it impossible for criminals to thrive in any community across Gauteng. So I want to conclude by saying there's another thing that's important, a new approach. A new approach, 2 years from now, our term will end. So we have introduced a very important program which focuses on deliverables, building the capacity of the provincial government to deliver on every target and mandate we have set for ourselves. And the citizens' mandate is quite crucial. So we will, in June we have our last lekgotla looking at the end of term. Of course, we'll still have others. But for the lekgotla in June of our Executive Council, will look at the remainder of the two years. There are specific things I've already said. Out of that, after the lekgotla, I'm going to sign delivery agreements, not performance agreements. Performance agreements are signed everywhere in the government system. They don't mean anything. So I'm going to sign delivery agreements with every MEC. After that, the MEC will sign a performance agreement with clear targets to deliver by end of term 2019. And there are very clear numbers in there, very clear deliverables in there. We will release these performance and delivery agreements to the public. That's the new approach. We want the citizens to also be able to know what is it that MEC X is supposed to be delivering. It must not be a secret. So that in case I reshuffle a cabinet, I don't have to go to explain to court why there is a cabinet reshuffle. The public should actually be the ones who say, Premier, this MEC is not delivering according to what they have signed up with you on behalf of the public, and that MEC must be fired. It must be open, known things, including the progress. So when we deliver progress reports, you can look at MEC by MEC, department by department. The MECs also have the same thing with the HODs. We can't renew contracts of MECs, HODs, when they have not met specific targets. Of course, in the next 2 years, there's few of that. But HODs, like all civil servants, you ask for bonuses. Hey, you like bonuses. You really like bonuses. So the bonuses, it must be clear what is the basis for paying a bonus. And because those performance agreements will be new ones for the next 2 years. So between now and 2019 to say HODX, the commitments there is to deliver the following. And we want the public to hold us accountable. We're building a more transparent government. There must be secrets. There must be secrets that are about state secrets. But working for the people must be something we do by opening ourselves up for criticism and scrutiny and for feedback. And this is what we are doing today. We are opening ourselves up for feedback. As you said, Ashraf, it's not because there is a rule or a law that says we must do a midterm review, but we are accountable. There's no law that says we must publish those delivery agreements, but we are accountable. Thank you very much.